أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Inshallah, to around 10-15 minutes, inshallah, so that you can eat in peace and then go to sleep, inshallah, in peace as well tonight. So, the talk that they wanted to give me, and it's a talk that I'm very passionate about, is a topic I'm very passionate about. It's about some of the problems that we in America are facing as an American Muslim community. And the fact of the matter, my dear brothers and sisters, is that we really are facing a lot of problems. And unfortunately, many of us don't want to talk about those problems. Because of the fact that I travel so much and I meet so many people in so many different communities, I can tell you so many horror stories that our hairs will grow white. Do you know the quantity of our young men and women who are leaving the faith? This is a topic we don't even talk about. The quantity of young men and women who come to me and say, I don't believe anymore, my mom and dad take me to the masjid. Emails that I get. People are not even believing in Islam anymore. As for the sins and the alcohol and the drugs and the pornography, the statistics will shock any one of us. So we have spiritual problems. We have problems of the body and flesh. On top of that, we have to battle with Islamophobia on the outside. So these are internal issues. On the outside, we have external issues. In so many countries in Europe, being a conservative or practicing or religious Muslim is almost on the verge of being banned. A number of countries, as you know, have banned certain garbs, whether it's the niqab, whether it's the jilbab. In Switzerland, as you know, they banned the building of mosques with minarets. In France, they have separate laws to be tested. In some provinces in Germany, immigrants are tested about, how should I put this nicely, orientations and whether they approve of those orientations in order to get citizenship. If they don't approve, they might not get citizenship. More and more issues are happening. There is a well-funded campaign in this country. Over $60 million were spent in the last 3 years by specific people in order to smear our faith and religion. And if you watch Fox News, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is this paranoia going on. And this is happening at a level, we can barely get, alhamdulillah, 500,000 in one night for the masjid. Do you think we're going to get 60 million to battle Islamophobia? That's not going to happen in the near future. So we have internal problems, we have external problems. And frankly, many of us are clueless about even recognizing the problems, much less beginning to solve them. Now I only have 10 minutes left. Obviously, this is not the time and place to go into all of the details. But you know what? I am honestly tired of being politically correct, because we don't have the luxury of not talking about these topics. I'm tired of ignoring this issue, hoping that it's just going to go away. No, it doesn't. It gets worse and worse. And because of this, in the last 5-6 years, those of you that have been following my lectures, I have become more and more open, more and more bold or foolish, one of the two, more and more blunt about narrowing down some of the problems and some of the solutions. So today I wanted to talk about 1 or 2 problems that I want every one of you to think about, and 1 or 2 solutions with regards to these problems. Of the problems that we have, my dear brothers and sisters, and again, I'm not going to be politically correct. We don't have time. So much is happening internally, externally. The rise of ISIS in your own community. You've had youngsters that have wanted to join this organization. Are you going to ignore these crises? Are you going to pretend it doesn't exist? Here in Chicago, multiple young teenagers have become enamored with such rhetoric, such ridiculous rhetoric. Do you want to know why? I'll tell you why. No matter how unpopular this is, I'll tell you why. Because most imams, most clerics are so apolitical that the youth find nothing of substance other than hot air in the masjid. And so they're not getting what they need to get. So where do they go? Underground, online, internet chat rooms. And that's where they hear these radical people. So one of the things that we need to do, one of the biggest problems that we have, with all respect to our scholars, we need to start developing our own scholars of our own ethnicity and background, i.e. born and raised in this land. With all respect to our scholars that have spent years abroad, I'm not, astaghfirullah, diminishing their role. What I am asking, and this is one of our biggest problems, my dear brothers and sisters, we in this room, again let me be blunt here, the upper middle class, us engineers and doctors, lawyers, some of us are multimillionaires, almost all of us own our houses, have 2 or 3 cars. We in this room, we need to start thinking of our own children going to become Islamic ulama. When my father came to this country, it was 1962, February, he landed in Houston, Texas. 1962, February, one of the first Pakistanis to come to Texas, to Houston, to study masters and a PhD. When my father came, he was single, bachelor, he got married eventually, brought my mother, then I was born in the 70s. He was the founder of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston, one of the largest networks in America, as you know, ISJ. He's one of the founders, one of the main people still, his signature is on the main document there. When my father came, built the first masjid in Houston, of that committee, of course he needed to import the scholars and imams. Where else are they going to come from? I grew up in the 70s and 80s. My first Maulvi Sahib, Hafiz Sahib, of course, has to be somebody from back home. Understood. We respect them, we admire them. They gave the sweat, the courage, they built the foundations. But it's now 2015. It's been 50 years. All of us in this room are either already acclimatized or our children are already born and raised here and they are American. They're not half American, they are American. My generation, we speak English better than most Americans speak English. We're more educated, as you know, generally speaking, statistically I mean. American Muslims, generally speaking, are upper middle class. Our education level, was it 10% of doctors are, in this part are Muslim? Maybe in Chicago 20%, but in the rest of America, high percentage, right? What does that indicate? This is our country and land. And if we really want Islam to flourish, our Islamic leaders need to be from amongst us. How is that going to happen? Very simple. We need to encourage our youngsters to look up to Islamic scholarship as one avenue as well. Along with becoming a doctor, becoming an engineer, becoming a lawyer, becoming an accountant. We need to make Islamic scholarship just as attractive. Out of every 100, we choose one of them. We help them, we sponsor them. We tell them, go and study, we'll take care of you. Just like when they go to med school, we take care of them. And we promise them, when you come back, you will have a job here. We'll train you. We need you to be the imam. Why? Because when our imams, with all respect to them, come, understandably they're apolitical, number one. Number two, understandably, they bring the culture that they are accustomed to. And there's nothing wrong with that, it's understood. If I were to go to another land, I'd take American culture with me. My accent, my demeanor, my manner of thinking would be American. So there's nothing wrong with a Pakistani imam coming and being Pakistani. That's understood. I'm not making fun of that or putting that down. But I'm asking you, for how long are we going to continue to import our scholarship when we have, mashallah, tabarakallah, the creme de la creme of our youth? One of those problems is when you bring a scholar. I studied in Medina for 10 years. A decade I was in Medina. Before that I have a degree in chemical engineering. I come back from Medina. And I will tell you from my own experience, the majority of questions young men and women ask me, I have not been trained to answer at that prestigious university. Do you think they taught us about atheism over there? Do you think they taught us about Darwinism and the problems of science in Medina? Think about it. I had to research on my own. Alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me with a science background, engineering background. I come and I do this. Alhamdulillah, I have a little bit of success in this regard. But what's going to happen for the next generation? So when our youngsters go, I remember still to this day, if I'm not mistaken, was he from Chicago or I forgot, I don't want to, perhaps I should mention this thing. A young man, his friend called me up, said, Sheikh, there's this very active youth, he was very active in our community, now he's basically become a murtad, an atheist. And there's nobody that can speak to him. I've convinced him that if you can speak to him, he's willing to speak to you. He knew me from online. I said, Khalas, okay, give me the number, I'll call him up. Arranged a call with him. We had an hour and a half conversation. And he brought forth such difficult arguments. Wallahi, I'm not gonna play games with you. These weren't easy stuff. Theodicy, the existence of evil, how can you explain this, issues from the seerah, difficult stuff, it's not easy. And I tried my best, kept on going back and forth. You know what he told me in the end, after an hour and a half? And by the way, he's an open murtad. He was an open murtad. I haven't spoken to him since then. He said, Sheikh, he called me Sheikh even though he's not a Muslim anymore. Sheikh, I just want to say one thing. I spoke to so many other scholars. They made fun of me. They kicked me out of the masjid. They didn't give me any attention. They said I'm going to hell. None of them answered my questions like you did. Thank you very much for this, and I'm going to think about what you said. Now, I don't know if I convinced him or not, because it was a one-way conversation and he then went on from there. I don't know if I convinced him or not. But it hurt me that he had to call long distance somebody that he's never physically met because the people in his locality could not answer those questions, or shunned him, or made fun of him, or said you're going to hell, or this or that. We need to save Islam in the next generation, and one of the ways we need to do that is to make Islam relevant to them. And how do we make Islam relevant to them? When their scholars are them. When they themselves take charge of their leadership and skills. So this is the first point that I want everybody here to think about. Just like you encourage your son, your daughter, and yes, by the way, we need female ulama as well. Our religion is not just male ulama. Ulama have always been female. Aisha radiallahu anha was the faqihah, the muhadditha of her time. And male tabi'un and even sahaba would come and sit and study with her and write hadith from her. Almost every single famous scholar that our tradition has ever had, even people like Ibn Taymiyyah, who's a very well-known alim, very famous, one of his main teachers was a female muhadditha. We've always had female scholarship. And when we deprive our women of even learning Islam, we get the opposite side. When they go to another extreme, maybe they want to have female-led prayers. We say, no, that's a bit too far. But why did they get that far? Because we deprived them. We deprived them of even coming to the masjid. They're not even supposed to come to the masjid. SubhanAllah. They go everywhere in the world. Everywhere. They go to universities, they go shopping, and yet from the one place which they should go, we say, no, don't come to the masjid. It's not good for you to come to the masjid. You see, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe that would have been fine. But this is 2015 America. And we have to fine-tune, not change, fine-tune and adapt within which the law allows us to adapt. And in my humble opinion, this is one of those modifications that needs to be made. Rather than discourage women from coming to the masjid, rather than tell them they have no place, rather than give them substandard facilities, smaller rooms, no air conditioning, murky carpets. No, they should have equal access to the masjid. They should be able to feel comfortable there. They should be given the same religious scholarship, the same type of, if there's a khutbah going on, they should be able to, if not physically see the khatib, at least have audio visual. At least not just shove them in a closet and then expect them to pay attention. These are the future, these are the mothers of our future children. And we're not going to teach them Islam. So we need to think long term about how we're going to preserve Islam. Another issue, and again I'm already getting controversial, you see what I'm saying here, right? Another issue, let me be as blunt as possible. One of our biggest problems, especially amongst the practicing Muslim crowd, which is really sad, because practicing Muslims should know better. Sometimes, unfortunately, they don't. One of our problems is the plethora of groups and schisms and sects that exist. So many different groups exist in our faith tradition. And these groups, almost all of them are imported from back home. The same groups that existed back home, when our ulama and mashayikh come, obviously they will bring those same groups. So even here in America, those same groups that flourished back home and are now fighting each other back home, are now even in Chicagoland, in the heart of America, as well, fighting and bickering. And even if they're not fighting, they feel something negative about that other Muslim because he prays like this, or he says Ameen out loud, or he prays 8 rather than 20, or this or that. And this narrow-minded bigotry, I'm sorry for being blunt here, this intolerance is wallahi going to kill us as a community. We don't, maybe, I'm not saying we should, maybe in Pakistan, in India, we have enough quantity that each group is happy. Maybe, I'm not saying it, I'm saying at least each group has, mashallah, hundreds of millions. Here in America, when our sum total is 6 million, and of those 6 million, perhaps only 1 or 2 million are actually practicing Muslims in the masjid, regularly praying 5 times a day. In that small community, we are now going to start bickering about who says Ameen, and where does your pants go, and what this and what that. And we start getting angry at each other, and boycotting one another, and not cooperating with one another. Wallahi, this is backwardness that Islam does not call for. Islam does not call for. Now, I want to be very clear here. I understand there are some differences that are important. For those differences, disagreements should be civil. For those differences, keep the disagreements civil. Don't make it uncivil. There are some major differences between two major strands of Islam. About the Sahaba, about this. That's a big deal. I understand. Maybe we're not going to feel comfortable praying in their masjid or them giving the khutbah in our masjid. Okay, but does that mean we have to hate upon them? Does that mean we have to preach against them? Does that mean we have to boycott them for any event? Maybe I'm not going to invite their leader to come give the khutbah, but surely we can come together to battle Islamophobia in the city. Correct? Surely we can come together and decide which of the two mayoral candidates is a better candidate for all Muslims and not just my firqa of Muslims. Correct? Surely we can understand there are levels of cooperation. I might not want to go to his masjid to pray, maybe. If he says things that are so bizarre that I really feel uncomfortable, okay. But must I give a whole khutbah to a group of people that don't need to know what he says? And say, oh, this sheikh says this sheikh, and preach hatred of another Muslim in a land where we are a minority? Think about it. And here's the point, and again, let me be very explicit here. And as I said, wallahi, had it not been for all of the problems we're facing, I would not be explicit. It's nice to be politically correct. But I am speaking for the sake of survival of our ummah. Therefore, I have to be explicit. I find it ludicrous that Sunni groups amongst themselves have so much distrust of each other. Deobandis, Tablighis, Salafis, Jamaat-e-Islamis, Ikhwan al-Muslimin. Each one of these movements, each one of them was founded in a particular time and place and circumstance. And now their people have come here and they're all spreading the same ideology. My dear brothers and sisters of all of these movements, if your founder, whether it is Maulana Zakaria Kandahlawi, or whether it is Abu Ala Maududi, whether it is Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, whether it is Hassan al-Banna, whoever your founder is, you know what? I fully believe if that founder were alive today and living in America, the movement he would have founded would reflect the circumstances of America. You know, I'll be honest with you, I personally respect and admire all of these names. This is who I am. I think Hassan al-Banna, I think Maududi, I think Zakaria Kandahlawi, I think all of these people have so much good in them. I might disagree with small points here and there, but I think overall their good was better, much better. And they did so much khair for the ummah, so much khair. These were people that started entire movements for people to come close to Allah and His Messenger. I respect and admire them for that. But you know what I don't respect and admire? When their followers make them to become the primary, the only lens of understanding Islam. And I challenge you to find any of them who viewed themselves in that manner. None of these great people, none of them said, I am the only authority of Islam. Because there's only one authority in Islam, and that is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why can't we understand that if Maulana Kandahlawi, if Abu Ala Maududi, if Hassan al-Banna were here in Chicago in 2015, these intellectual giants, and they are all intellectual giants, would look at the situation and think about what's going on, and their plan of action would have reflected current circumstances. Why are we so narrow-minded that we still go back to their curriculum 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 100 years ago, and don't realize, you know, the problems they faced? My son doesn't face them anymore. The issues they talked about, my son has never even heard of them. So why should I continue to brainwash my followers about that book or that teaching when the circumstances have changed? Rather, we should live up to their ideal and become the same movers and shakers that they did. Not by cutting and pasting their methodologies, but by thinking like they thought and then applying it to the current situation. There should not be any anger or mistrust or hatred between these various movements, because all of them want to worship Allah based upon the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. Is that not correct? Is that not correct? And these two principles, which are embodied in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, these two principles are what make up Islam. So anytime you meet a Muslim who wants to worship Allah based upon the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, look at the positive, look at the bright side. Don't concentrate on, oh, this guy's beard is this long, and this guy does this, and this guy does that. SubhanAllah. All of these differences go back to how they interpret the Quran and Sunnah. They do not go back to them rejecting the Quran and Sunnah. There's a huge difference between interpreting the same text differently versus rejecting the text. And none of these movements rejects the text of the Quran and Sunnah. Correct? Yes. So why then do we have this tension that the Salafi is not going to cooperate with the Deobandi is going to stay away from the Jamaat Islami, each one is speaking evil about the other? As it is, all of us put together, the conservative or practicing or religious Muslims, is probably less than 1 million in this country. And we're still going to have problems with one another? We need to pool our resources together, our financial resources. Imagine, for this project, if we were to quiz you, how many rakats do you pray? 20? Oh no, you're not going to come into this hall, okay? Where do you place your hand? What do you say, Ameen, quiet or silently? Okay? Moon sighting, oh my God, for moon sighting. What if we were to do that? And we only accept the donations of those who agree with me. Wouldn't that be foolish? Wouldn't that be foolish? Do you think we'd build a center if we did that? So if we understand that even to build a center, we need to cooperate together, how about to build an ummah? How about to build an ummah? Where's the cooperation there? All of us. Now, let me again be frank here. I'm an academic. I have a PhD in Islamic studies and theology. I'm a theologian. That's my speciality. So, I know very well the differences between different theologies and movements. I'm not saying they're all the same. I'm not saying they're all equally valid. I just told you, some differences are so big, maybe I wouldn't want to pray in their place of worship. But those differences should not make us uncivil to one another, crude and rude to one another. Those differences can be kept even as we cooperate on other platforms. That's my point. Let's be practical. Somebody's differences are so much, maybe I'm not going to invite him to give the khutbah in my masjid, but I can invite him to help out in other projects of a community nature. For a women's shelter, do we care about what his aqidah is? To build a women's shelter? No. So we have therefore to be more open-minded and tolerant while still remaining faithful to our tradition and heritage. And I said as explicitly as possible, within the various Sunni movements, there should be no animosity and hatred whatsoever. There should be no lack of cooperation, no mistrust. Salafis should support Deobandi institutions, Deobandi should support Jamaat Islami movements, Jamaat Islami should, all of them should come together for the greater good of Masjid, of Islamic schools, of battling Islamophobia, of coming together for the community. And yes, they might want to differ on the very small minutiae. Keep those differences academic amongst the advanced students. Don't trickle them down to the public, because the average public couldn't care less about those differences. The average Muslim member, even in this audience, wallahi, I know if I were to quiz you, most of you would not even know what is really the difference between Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb and Maududi. You wouldn't know this. So why then do our ulama want to bring it down to the masses when it's not relevant to the masses? This is a problem. And it's a problem that causes confusion and no benefit whatsoever. We also, my dear brothers and sisters, and with this I conclude because I know I'm coming between you and the food. We also need to understand that in this country, certain minor adjustments do need to be made. And this is a very difficult topic, a very sensitive topic, because it scares a lot of people. It scares a lot of people when you talk about change. But the fact of the matter is that our Sharia allows for some change. Some. Notice I said some. Who's going to decide that change? Scholars trained in the Sharia who are open-minded. And one of our problems is the people who call for the change are not scholars trained in the Sharia. And that's a problem. If you want to bring about a change within the tradition, study the tradition, master the tradition, become an expert, and then Bismillah, tafaddal, go ahead and do what you want. But if you haven't trained, then it's not your forte. But for the ulama, and this is definitely a problem, we have a huge tension. Again, let me be explicit. Throw political correctness out the window. Our problem right now, one of our biggest problems, is the battle between the conservatives and the liberals. The battle between those who want to stick rigidly and those who want to change everything. Throw the baby out with the bathwater and just whatever is legit, it's halal. Everything is permissible. Our problem is between these two movements right now in this country. We have Muslims who are ultra-conservative, ultra-hardcore, ultra-literalist. And we have Muslims who are on the flip side, exact opposite. Isn't that the case?
Yes.
That's exactly the case. As usual, Islam is the middle ground. And each of these two extremes feeds off of the other. I want you to understand this point. Because there are hardcore fanatic literalists, you will get the progressives. Because they're going to say, look at those bad guys, look at those weirdos, look at their ridiculous fatwas here and there. And once in a while you'll find something on YouTube, some bizarre fatwa. Recently some guy said the earth doesn't go around the sun or whatever. This fatwa went viral. You know, you're going to find these things. They make fun of them. And who's not going to make fun of this, right? I mean, like, yeah, it is. But this guy's an unknown nobody. He becomes an internet fame because he says something stupid. Okay? And then you have the opposite side as well, where you have the religiously conservative simply look at what's happening and just, they're aghast. Oh my God, you have a woman leading all of these mixed men doing sajda in front of the men. And they too should be aghast at that, yes. But here's the point. There is indeed a middle ground. Who's going to decide that middle ground? As I said, trained ulama. Trained ulama. Ulama who are understanding of the American situation. And once again, we get back to my first point, which is American trained ulama. And who understand the Sharia has certain red lines you cannot cross. And if you listen to many of my lectures, you will hear me sometimes talk here and there about some changes that can and should be taking place. I just mentioned one today right now, and that is that we need to encourage and not discourage our women from coming to the masjid. And we need to make the masjid women's facilities exactly the same in terms of ambience, in terms of look, in terms of everything as the men's facilities. We cannot make our sisters feel as if they're second class. Because if we do, the third class for them is to leave Islam and go find something else. This is the reality that I can tell you from my own experiences. This is a change, a modification. Maybe 1,000 years ago wouldn't have worked. And on. There are so many other examples that I have spoken about. Now is not the time to get into. I just want to put this in your mind. That Islam does allow, the Sharia does allow for fine-tuning. We don't need an overhaul. We don't need to destroy everything. No. But the Sharia has within it, and that is why, my dear brothers and sisters, and with this point I conclude, that is why, if you look at Islam globally, wherever Islam went, Islam was practiced slightly differently in that culture and civilization. Isn't that the case? If you go to Malaysia, look at how they are living. Look at their custom, look at their ritual, look at their, okay, simple example, look at their hijab of their women. It's not the same as the hijab of our sisters in Nigeria. And that hijab is not the same as the hijab of the sisters in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in China. They're all, mashallah, the religious Muslims are covered. They're all covered properly, but the style, the cut, the fabric, the colors, all of this is different. So for somebody to come along and say, oh, the only acceptable hijab is the Pakistani hijab. I'm just giving hijab an example, by the way. Don't read into it, just an example. The only acceptable hijab is the way my grandfather and grandmother practice it, and that is in India, in Timbuktu. Subhanallah. Why can't we, and I'm going to shock you when I say this, develop an American hijab? With the style, the cut, the fabric, in conformity with the Sharia. Nobody's saying we change the Sharia. Nobody is saying that. But why can't we develop something from within? Now again, I'm using hijab as an example. But the same can be applied to wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows room for change. And for this, once again, we need ulama who understand our civilization, our culture, and who are also respectful of the tradition. So these are some of our challenges, some of our issues, and inshallah ta'ala, I just wanted to leave you with these points so that you can think about them. I know this raises a lot of questions as well. I know that there are other points as well, but obviously time is limited. My only goal in doing this is to get our minds thinking. To start thinking, as we say in English, outside the box. To start a little bit of energy up there, right? In the Islamic field. Start thinking a little bit. Start finding those scholars, those ulama that inshallah ta'ala they can be connected with in this regard. And slowly but surely, the first element of change is to recognize the problem, to see what the issue is. That's how you do it. So these were 3 or 4 points I wanted to bring to your mind. And inshallah ta'ala, let me conclude on this point. I do believe the future is brighter, inshallah ta'ala. I do believe the future is optimistic. Yes, indeed, there's a lot to be worried about, but let me finish with this anecdote, true anecdote, that one of the stories that really touches me the most to hear from my father, and I talk to him a lot, and may Allah Azza wa Jalla give him a long life. He's 80 years old now, may Allah Azza wa Jalla give him a long and healthy life, and I always benefit from his wisdom. One of the stories that really touched me, that he told me in 1962, when he first came, he was the founder of the MSA in Texas, in University of Houston. He did so many things. He also was the first person to lead the Eid in Houston. To lead the Eid prayer. Now get this, forget moon sighting. Back then, they would find out Eid had already occurred 2-3 days ago. And they would schedule the Eid for the first Sunday because you needed to be off on that day and they wouldn't have the luxury of... So they announced, we're going to pray Eid, right, in the auditorium, in one of the rooms of the university center, and a grand total, 1962, a grand total of 3 Muslims come for Eid. 3 Muslims come for Eid. On a Sunday, 5 days after the actual Eid has occurred. I mean, what are you going to do? There's no telephones that you can... You guys don't understand this. I did not understand this. My father, maybe some of you elders know this. My father told me when they had to make a call to Pakistan, you had to tell the operator, and the operator would actually, I don't understand what's going on, but set it up, but 3-4 days later, I don't know, I see some of you nodding your heads. I didn't understand. You couldn't just call directly. You had to schedule a call. So some of you guys remember this, I take it, huh? Okay, so you literally had to schedule. So when you find out it's Eid, 3 days after Eid, he finds out. So then they schedule it for the Sunday, 3 people show up. And who's going to lead the Salah? There is no Imam, there is no Maulvi Sahib. So the first time in my life, my father leads the Eid Salah. Okay, he gives the Eid khutbah to 2 people in front of him, he leads the Salah. This is 1962. Fast forward 40 years. Fast forward 40 years. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me to give the khutbah in Houston, Texas, around 43 years after that incident. And we didn't give it in some small room in the university center. I prayed and I led the Eid at the George R. Brown Convention Center, which is the largest convention center in Houston, Texas. And there weren't just 3 people praying Eid. There was a grand total of 30,000 people praying Eid. And in that khutbah, and this will be one of my fondest memories of my life, my father was sitting there. And I said that 43 years ago, my father led the first khutbah in Houston. And my goal, my vision is that insha'Allah ta'ala, my son or daughter or your son or daughter will live up to see the flourishing of Islam even more than this. That insha'Allah ta'ala, my son or your son will one day be leading the Eid Salah in Houston, Texas, not even for 30,000, but for 300,000 people. This is the goal. And insha'Allah, if we look at what's happening, really this is a very realistic goal. So the future is insha'Allah bright, but we just have to take the precautions, the the necessary measures, think a little bit outside the box, and inshallah, with the help of Allah, with some determination and with the proper understanding of Islam, we will make it to our goal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and me. May Allah Azza wa Jalla bless your community. MashaAllah, you raised a large amount of money. You got the funds that you had wanted for tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow this community to grow even more and more. You in Chicago have a huge responsibility. One of the highest percentages and the highest quantity of Muslims in all of North America, as you know, is here in Chicago. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bring from your own ranks Huffaz and ulama and the future generation of Islam. May Allah Azza wa Jal cause more and more masajid to be built and cause those masajid to always fall short of the space. We're happy that we don't have space. It's a positive thing. We want us to be jam-packed and keep on moving bigger and better. May Allah Azza wa Jal cause Islam to grow and continue to grow. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.